It's interesting. I can remember when I was younger, even into my early 20s, where I had grown up in church. I had even read the Bible a lot. But if you were to ask me, what is the gospel? I wouldn't have been able to tell you, which sounds kind of odd. I knew what a gospel was. And, you know, there's Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, the four gospels. I knew what people would refer a lot of times to their Bible as the gospel and stuff, but I didn't know specifically what it was. And I think it's something that's kind of sad that someone like me growing up, I just didn't know. And I don't think it's that it wasn't talked about or presented, but somehow I was missing it. Several years ago, I was listening to a group of church planters talk, and they were talking about the gospel, and they were saying that they realized a lot of the pastors they were interviewing to be church planters didn't actually know the gospel. When they would ask them directly, what's the gospel and how do you share it? They would get all kinds of different answers. And that's been my experience a lot of times, even meeting with different pastors and just asking that question. A few years ago, I was in a conversation with a group of pastors, and I sat there for a while just listening as all kinds of different pastors in the room were questioning what the gospel was. And finally they said, hey, Tim, you've been pretty quiet. What would you say? And I said, well, I think it's pretty clear. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verses 1 to 8, this is what Paul says. Now I would remind you, brothers, of the gospel I preached to you. Okay, so this is Paul saying directly the gospel that he preached when he went all through the book of Acts. We read about it, going from city to city, starting churches. He preached a message, a gospel message. And he says what it is right here. This is the gospel I preached to you, which you received, in which you stand, and by which you are being saved, if you hold fast to the word that I preached to you, unless you believed it in vain. For I delivered to you as of first importance what I also received, that Christ died for our sins in accordance with Scripture, that he was buried, and that he was raised on the third day in accordance with Scriptures, and that he appeared to Cephas, that's Peter, then to the 12, then he appeared to more than 500 brothers at one time, most of whom are still alive, though some have fallen asleep. Then he appeared to James, then to all the apostles, and last of all, as to one untimely born, he appeared also to me. Now, this is huge because he literally is just laying it out there. What is the gospel? That Jesus Christ died, that he was buried, and that he rose again on the third day. Three things. Right there. That's the gospel. That's the good news of Jesus Christ. And he says in here too, verse 3, for I delivered it to you as of first importance. He doesn't say it's just important. This is the first thing. If we don't get that, what are we doing? John Stott was a very famous Anglican pastor and theologian, great writer, great preacher of the gospel. He said this: Christianity is in its very essence a resurrection religion. The concept of resurrection lies at its heart. If you remove it, Christianity is destroyed. If you remove it, Christianity is destroyed. At the heart of Christianity is the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. The death and burial we talk about, I preached about this last Sunday and Saturday, about the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. But if Jesus didn't raise from the dead, nothing else matters. Absolutely nothing else matters. And yet, I'm saying this because in a lot of churches today, the resurrection is something that is assumed, but it's not actually preached and taught. One of the things I find interesting, or maybe I should say sad, a lot of times as I talk to different pastors about this time of year, as I'm seeing them, meeting with them, I will ask the same question. What are you preaching for Easter? What are you preaching for Easter? I recently had a discussion with that. And as I had that discussion, I got a couple different answers. And it wasn't what I thought. And then finally they were like, well, what about you? What are you going to be preaching on Easter? I said, the resurrection of Jesus Christ? And the response was, oh yeah, I guess that's a good idea, right? This is of first importance. We are at the end of the Gospel of Luke, chapter 24. Part of me wants to just rush all through the entire thing because there's so much exciting information here. But what we're going to do is take it in 3 sections. Today, we're going to look at the first 12 verses of chapter 24. Then on Saturday and Sunday, on our weekend services, we're going to cover the next section. And then next Wednesday, we'll finish out chapter 24 and finish out the entire Gospel of Luke. When we look at it, tonight we're going to focus in on probably the good way to call it is come and see, all right? Come and see this gospel. Come and see what has happened. On the weekend services, we're going to look at the phrases grow and learn. And then next Wednesday, the phrases go and tell, okay? And you can break these into these sections. So when we're looking at this tonight, our goal is the phrases come and see. This is what we read in Luke chapter 24, starting at verse 1. On the first day of the week, at early dawn, they went to the tomb, taking spices they had prepared. And they found the stone rolled away from the tomb. But when they went in, they did not find the body of the Lord. While they were perplexed about this, behold, 2 men stood by them in dazzling apparel. Hang on, I'm highlighting that for a reason. And as they were frightened and bowed their faces to the ground, the men said to them, why do you seek the living among the dead? He is not here, but is risen. Remember how he told you while he was still in Galilee that the Son of Man must be delivered into the hands of sinful men and be crucified, and on the 3rd day rise. And they remembered his words, and returning from the tomb, they told all these things to the 11 and to all the rest. Now it was Mary Magdalene and Joanna and Mary the mother of James and the other women with them who told these things to the apostles. But these words seemed to them an idle tale, and they did not believe them. But Peter rose and ran to the tomb. Stooping and looking in, he saw the linen cloths by themselves, and when he went home, marveling at what had happened. Now, when we look at this, we find this account in all 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They all give a little bit of different details. Some have looked at it and tried to say that the different accounts contradict each other. But I think that's an unfair way to look at this. These are accounts taking place of the same event. Now think about this. As I mentioned earlier, on Sunday, we had a room full of people in here, and there were baptisms that took place. If you were to go around and talk to different people that were in that room when those baptisms took place, you're going to get different accounts from different people. One person might look at you and say, oh yeah, it was a great time. When we were there, there were baptisms, and we witnessed Garland and his son Ace get baptized. Okay? Somebody else you might ask, like if you were to come up to me and say, so Tim, there were baptisms that took place on Sunday? I said, yeah, we baptized 4 people. At first it was going to be 2, and then 2 more joined. So there were four in all that got baptized. You could go around, and if you asked somebody else, like Bill and Yvonne, and you said, oh, people got baptized? Well, they're very close with the Cuts Force. So they would say, oh yeah, Thea and Esme got baptized. Are those 3 accounts contradictory? No, all of them are true. All of them are true. It depends on your perspective and what you're looking at that time. That's what's happening with this. And it's what takes place with any type of eyewitness accounts of any event. Multiple people looking at the same exact event will detail different things about that event. When you put all of it together, what you see is that there were more than one trip that took place with people going to the tomb of Jesus. And it wasn't just one woman or 2 women. There were multiple women going at the same time. Now, I love this. All 4 Gospels highlight this fact, that to the resurrection of Jesus Christ, who were the first witnesses? Women. It was the women that were Jesus' disciples that witnessed this first. And I love that Luke highlights here that there's these angels there. And the part we read right here, it just said men in dazzling clothing and stuff. I don't know why. For some reason, when it said that, I thought of Elton John, and I had to get that out of my head. But, you look at it, later on, Luke says that they were angels that were there. And it's so reminiscent of the kind of thing we see at the beginning of the Gospels. You look at it with the birth of Jesus. There were the rich, the powerful, faithful Jewish people, the Jewish leaders in Jerusalem, the chief priests, the rabbis. They were able to tell King Herod where Jesus was born, but none of them went. Instead, what you have at the beginning of the Gospels are very unlikely people coming to the birth of Jesus Christ. First, it's shepherds, the lowliest of the low in their society of culture. Nobody wanted that career. And yet, they were the ones who came and celebrated the birth of Christ. Who else do you have? Not Jewish men. You have Gentiles from the east coming to worship Jesus Christ. And now, at his resurrection, again, it's not chief priests. It's not the men of high station. It's not even the men of low station. It's the women who are at the tomb worshiping Jesus Christ. I love this fact, and we're going to jump into John a little bit later in a few minutes here and see this, just some of the interaction that takes place. But I think it's something that's incredible to consider. Today, in our culture, there are a lot of people that think that the gospel is repressive to women. And that seems pretty baffling to me when you really look at all the things that Christianity has done for women throughout the centuries, and especially in our culture. I think it's just absolutely beautiful. What they do is they come and the tombstone has been rolled away. I have a picture that I wanted to show you guys of that. A lot of times what we think is that it's just this big cave in the ground with just some big boulder that they rolled up and it happened to fit just right. That's most of the pictures we get. This is actually a 2,000-year-old tomb just outside of Jerusalem. And you can see it's carved in, and there is a round stone, almost like a big millstone, that is off to the side. What would happen is they would roll that stone back. It would take several men to roll the whole thing back, set it up in such a way where it was almost like spring-loaded, where when they were ready to close it, they could just pull out some levers and the whole thing would roll back in place. They would do that so that it wasn't easy for grave robbers to come in and or animals to get into the tombs. But it was possible to open these things back up, but it just took several large men or a whole lot of small men, I guess, to get together and to roll it out of the way. They were there wondering, how they were going to get this thing open. And when they got there, they found that the guards were already gone and the tomb was open. Now, here's a question. Why was the tomb open? Have you ever thought about that? Was it that Jesus was resurrected and suddenly he's like, hello, somebody let me out, It's sort of like, I've always wanted to reply, I never have, but have you ever heard someone who's just flabbergasted say something like, if my father were alive, what would he say today? Like, have you ever heard someone say that? And I've always wanted to say, he'd probably be going, help, help, let me out of this box, right? But it's not like that's what Jesus did. What we find in all of the Gospels is Jesus is able in his resurrected body just to appear wherever he wants to appear. The tomb wasn't opened for Jesus to get out. It was opened for the disciples to be able to go in, which is a good distinction to make. When we look at this, the two angels look at the women who are at the tomb. They're wondering why the body is there, what has happened. And their statement is a little bit of a reprimand. He is not here, but he is risen. Remember how he told you while he was still in Galilee that the Son of Man must be delivered into the hands of sinful men and be crucified and on the third day rise. It's one of the things that we've pointed out time and time again as we've gone through the Gospel of Luke. Jesus told them directly over and over and over again the truth, but they couldn't comprehend it, and they didn't hear it. It's one of those things that later it's all going to start making sense to them. And even when you get into the book of Acts, what you find is they spend their time just searching scriptures, looking at the prophecies, trying to discover all of these things. That's something we're going to focus in on the messages on Saturday and Sunday this weekend, on the fact that the Old Testament completely points to Jesus in all of these different ways. And I'm excited to be able to kind of open our eyes to some of those things that are going on in the Old Testament. As the story goes on here, the women go and they tell the disciples that Jesus has been raised from the dead, that they saw these angels. And in verse 11, it says, but these words seemed to them an idle tale, and they did not believe the women. In Greek there, the word that's used is that it's actually normally translated nonsense. The ESV kind of softens it a bit, idle tales. It usually is translated nonsense. And most often in Koine Greek, it's describing like somebody who is sick, has a high fever, and is just delusional and ranting, okay? Maybe better yet, in our culture, how many of you enjoy the videos of teenagers when they get their wisdom teeth pulled and they're all hopped up on the anesthesia and just ranting and saying things? Those are always fun. They literally think that of the women at the tomb. They're like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, they're just like some feverish ranting. Are you guys sick? Are you on something? This is impossible, right? And I think that's important for us to understand, because a lot of times we get this idea that they just weren't that smart. They weren't as smart as people today. We get this idea that when Jesus rose from the dead, that they were like, oh, hey, look at that. Jesus just rose from the dead. This was something that didn't happen, okay? It's not like they're just seeing people rise from the dead all the time. In the gospel stories, we do have the resurrection of Lazarus taking place. We have some stories about a centurion's servant. We have a story about a synagogue ruler's daughter. But all of those stories, people are shocked when it happens. Because guess what? It's not common for people just to raise from the dead. And when Jesus rose from the dead, even though he told them exactly what was going to take place, and even when people saw it and experienced that, it was just as shocking for them as it is for us today. Just as shocking. And so you see the process of Peter going, stooping, looking in. Now, let's jump over to John. John chapter 20 has basically the same story, but there's something interesting about the way John writes this account in his gospel. John chapter 1, verse 20, this is what we read. What? Yes, 20 verse 1. Thank you. What did I say? Yeah, not chapter 20, not chapter 1, verse 20. Good grief. Although, if you'd like to read that, feel free. John 20, verse 1. Now on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb early while it was still dark and saw that the stone had been taken away from the tomb. And so she ran and went to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one whom Jesus loved, and said to them, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they laid him." So Peter went out with the other disciple, and they were going toward the tomb. Both of them were running together, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. Let me just comment on that. Throughout John's gospel, he refers to the disciple that Jesus loved. And who is the disciple Jesus loved? John, right? He refers to himself that way. It's sort of like in Genesis when Moses writes, and Moses was the most humble man on all the earth, right? You look at it, and here's John referring to himself not as John throughout his gospel, but the disciple Jesus loved. And I find this comical because you do see throughout the Gospels this sort of thing taking place. The disciples, full of testosterone, are always competing with each other and trying to see who's best. And, John makes sure to call himself in here. There's Peter and the disciple Jesus loved. And note that he points out that they both go running, but who wins? John makes sure to point out he wins and gets there first. Good going, John. Verse 5, and stooping to look in, he saw the linen cloths lying there, but he did not go in. Then Simon Peter came, following him, and went into the tomb. He saw the linen cloths lying there, and the face cloth, which had been on Jesus' head, not lying with the linen cloths, but folded up in a place by itself. Then the other disciple, who had reached the tomb first, also went in, and he saw and believed. For as yet they did not understand the scripture, that he must rise from the dead. Then the disciples went back to their homes. Now, something that if you know Greek, you would catch in here, but we don't. We just read a scenario happen here as John describes it. Peter and John are racing to the tomb. John's faster, right? He gets there first, and it says that John stands outside the tomb. He looks in, and he could see that the cloth was there and that there was nobody in the tomb. Then it says that Peter comes up, and Peter actually goes into the tomb, and he sees that the body isn't there. And then John goes in, and John sees and believes. 3 times it says that they saw. Those are 3 completely different words in Greek. 3 different terms completely are being used. When you look at it, the first term is this. As John came up, he just observed. That's the other way to translate that word. He's observing what's taking place. Oh, wait, the stone is rolled away. There are no guards, and there's no body. He is simply making observations about what's taking place. When I was younger, for about 8 weeks of my life, I was actually a behind-the-wheel driving instructor. And then I became sane. Right? I was doing behind the wheel, working for someone I knew at a driving school. And we used to do, one of the things we'd try to do with students is just do an observation drive. One of the first things we would do. Teach people how to be defensive drivers, just make observations. Driving down the road, things you think about but you don't say out loud. I'm driving down the road. There is a yellow line in the middle, a white dotted line over here. I'm driving down the road, and there's an intersection coming up. I don't have to stop. Other people have to stop. I'm driving down the road, and there's a small bird on a power line over there. Doesn't matter at all. I'm getting distracted. I better look back over here. Things that we think while we're driving, but verbalizing outside, just making observations. That's literally what that means. It's the first level of the people coming to the resurrection of Jesus Christ. They are curious, making observations about what's taking place. That is awesome. That's awesome. I love the fact that what the Lord is doing at our church today is we have people coming, observing. They don't understand everything that's going on. They don't believe yet. But we have an environment where people can come and just observe what is taking place and soak it in. That's absolutely incredible. I think a lot of times at churches, we gear everything for churched people. Churched people. Can I be very open with you guys? Sometimes church people drive me crazy, right? When I was in Bible college, there was one day I came home from school. I fell on our couch, and I just put my hands over my head, and I let out a long just, And Cam came in. She goes, "Babe, are you okay?" And I'm like, Yeah, I'm fine. And she goes, what's the matter? I said, I'm just sick of Bible college. I just want to get around some pagans, right? It was just, there was a stuffiness, a staleness, sometimes a fakeness that was going on. And I think sometimes in church, we think that we're good at kind of acting Christian, trying to cover up our stuff, coming like we're all clean. But the people in the world can see it that quick. We're not good at poker, okay? You look at it, they can see it. But I love the fact that what is happening here is that there are people coming that feel safe, that they're not yet a believer, that they don't know everything, but they can just come and observe and ask questions and not feel threatened. Years ago when we started our church, after every single service, I used to do question and answers. And there was one day, we were meeting over at Baker Prairie at the time, middle school, that I said, hey, are there any questions about the sermon today? And this lady raised her hand. And I said, yeah. Hi, I'm Tim. I haven't met you before. And she said what her name was. And I said, yeah, what's your question? And she goes, well, let me just start out by saying, I disagree with everything you just said. And you could just see, people getting upset. And I was like, okay, that's fine. I disagreed with half of the things I said. So, what is it? And she asked just an incredible question. And it led into a good question and answer time. And it led into hey, you want to get lunch later? And let's dig into that deeper. And I love that. That's the way our churches should be. Why? Because that's the way Jesus was. That's the way Jesus was. People could come and just see what was going on. That's what first happens at the tomb. They come and they just see. The next one is Peter goes in. And the Greek word there is where we get our word for theory. For theory. He is coming in and he investigates it. He sees the stuff and it's starting to click with him and he has a theory. Wait a second. The ladies just told us, an angel told them Jesus was resurrected. So I have this information over here. Here is one witness. Now I am here. I see no guards in place. The tomb rolled back. The body is gone. And all the linen cloths are right here. In Jewish culture, that would be considered another witness. Two witnesses now, right? Witnesses can be people or things that are concrete that way. So you look at it, and suddenly he's like, whoa, wait a second. Now I have a theory about this. Is this possible? Is this possible? Man, I love that. Digging into the Word of God, hearing people's testimonies, asking questions, and seeing just how beautiful and incredible all this is. I'm going to put you on the spot again, Garland. You're low-hanging fruit tonight, buddy. I have so appreciated over the last year just different times when I've gotten together with Garland over coffee or going to his house for dinner, and that's not a hint, by the way. Being able to sit, times I've gotten a text from him, hey, Tim, do you have a few minutes? Can we talk on the phone? Or just questions over text. Just the questioning and being able to process all this and watch his faith grow to the point where you can see God is doing something here and I don't have to push. I can just be here and watch the Holy Spirit at work as his faith grows. Beautiful. Absolutely incredible. Then John goes all the way into the tomb and it says he saw and believe. The word saw there actually means to perceive with understanding. For him, he got to the point where he's like, observations, I made a theory, boom. It all clicks now. Jesus Christ rose from the dead. That's incredible. That is incredible. I want to encourage you. I don't know where you are with this. I mean, as I look around, I know most of you tonight, I know most of you would say I'm a believer, but I really don't know where you are with all of this. When we dig down further in the story, you see Thomas. You see Thomas. Poor guy, what's his nickname? Doubting Thomas. Doubting Thomas. Why do we put him down that way? It's a legitimate question. I mean, that's what the disciples were wondering with the women ahead of time. Like, you guys must be ranting, like something's going on, until they actually saw this evidence and then Jesus appeared to them. That's what it took for them. And notice in the stories, Jesus doesn't put Thomas down for his doubts. He's like, Thomas, here I am. You said you wouldn't believe unless you could put your fingers in my wounds and my hands and my side. Go ahead. If that's the evidence you need, here it is. Which means this. We all doubt sometimes. And it's okay. Why? He's big enough to handle our doubts. He's big enough. But when we doubt, there are times I doubt. You're like, oh, you do? Yeah. There are times little doubts will creep in. But I go back to what I know, what I have observed, what I have studied, what I have experienced, both personally and the testimonies of those around me. And then it all clicks. Boom. Jesus Christ rose from the dead. His Spirit is with us in his church. His Spirit is in me. It's in you. And I'm seeing his miracles all around.